It's no secret that the release of Elite Dangerous Odyssey has been somewhat of a disaster. From constant server problems to major performance issues, from seemingly unending bugs to broken planet tech. There's a lot that went wrong and, well, plenty to make up for. Now, before we get into Frontier's response to all of this, I briefly want to reiterate my thoughts on this situation. Firstly, all big online game releases come with problems. That much is given. A certain number of issues and bugs can be forgiven. However, as I said in a previous video, I'm extremely disappointed in Frontier that they released Odyssey in this condition. On many levels, it feels like a beta, and I believe Odyssey should have been delayed or released as a beta and priced accordingly. After all, they did go from alpha directly to release. Many people feel that all of these problems are down to development mistakes, whilst others, me included, believe Odyssey was rushed to the market in order to hit a deadline. Frontier's financial year ends in June, and delaying Odyssey beyond that point would have affected Frontier's 2021 profits. But whatever the ultimate reason Odyssey arrived in this very disappointing condition, we will likely never know. But do keep in mind a number of things. Firstly, during alpha, many of these problems were brought up by the player base and pointed out to Frontier. Frontier replied that not to worry, they have an internal build that is much better further along and doesn't have any of the issues that were pointed out. I can only assume that the release version of Odyssey is indeed that version that Frontier discussed previously, but that it didn't survive first contact with the player base thanks to being untested. So, where do things stand now? Well, Frontier have released 2 statements today, giving some insight as to what's going on. One of these statements is from David Braben and addresses the server and performance issues. The server issues have resulted in a lot of disconnects and other problems. It turns out that these problems have been caused by fleet carriers. In short, Odyssey and Horizons exist as 2 completely separate game worlds on separate servers. Data such as market information, background simulation and more is shared across both worlds. Fleet carriers are another asset that exist in both worlds, and this is where the problem came in. When fleet carriers jump, this jump would take place on both the Horizons and Odyssey game worlds. However, this resulted in a feedback loop of the data, with the carrier data moving between the 2 servers, and this resulted in an overload and many other problems. Of course, this alone wasn't the only problem, but it was the main one. Beyond that, the high player numbers also had a massive impact on server performance. Talking of the performance, we all know this is a huge deal for Odyssey. It's affecting the different players in different ways. Some people with low-end hardware have flawless performance, whilst others with very high-end hardware are having lots of trouble. Vice versa, of course, is also true. As yet, Frontier say they haven't been able to identify what is causing these problems, however they are working on them. Yet it seems this is something that is going to take quite a while to fix. More on that in just a moment. The third issue that many people have is the problems with the UI. For Odyssey, the UI throughout the game has been redesigned. However, feedback for this is largely negative. Information has been moved or obscured both on the galaxy map and ship outfitting. Menus take longer to navigate and are now less intuitive. There are many other issues besides. The UI then is something that Frontier say they are keen to fix. The second of the 2 statements then from Frontier specifically focuses on the UI and states that Frontier are wanting to fix many problems here. Finally, Frontier will be releasing a roadmap by the 4th of June that will detail how Frontier will be dealing with the various problems. The fact that the roadmap itself may be up to 10 days away shows that Frontier are viewing this situation with Odyssey as a relatively long-term problem. The console release for Odyssey has not been mentioned by Frontier as a part of all of this. However, many people, myself included, are speculating that Odyssey will remain in a state of bug fixing and optimization right up to the release of console version and likely beyond. That is a multi-month path then, and possibly as much as 6 months. Unfortunately, as yet, there's been no official word on the current state of the new planetary tech, which to all intents and purposes seems to be broken in multiple ways. A great video by Black Maze highlights many of the issues. Meanwhile, a Reddit post detailing many of the graphics performance problems in Odyssey that goes into analysing this situation. It's a great report, do have a look at that. Elsewhere, a detailed forum post bullet points to a multitude of problems with the new UI. All of these links on all of these threads can be found in the video description. One more thing that I haven't seen mentioned too much is the poor NPC AI that can be found in conflict zones and elsewhere. I'll be talking about more on this in the future. For now then, Odyssey remains in a very poor way, largely thanks to being released too early. And this really is a point that's worth keeping in mind. None of the statements released by Frontier so far even go anywhere near talking about the release date of Odyssey, or even suggesting that it was potentially released too early. Instead, Frontier seem very keen to keep the finger pointed at technical and coding issues, all of which of course can be overcome with time, but time really is the issue here, isn't it? If Odyssey had been released a little bit later, maybe even had a full beta process, then most of these troubles could have been avoided. Unfortunately then, Frontier find themselves in the position where the development team are having to work extremely hard to fix all of these problems that are not really any fault of their own. After all, the release date is not something that's decided by developers. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.